Good evening. My name is Justin Moore, and I'm the CEO of the American Physical Therapy Association. I'm delighted to have you join us tonight for a special presentation on APTA Facebook Live that really talks about leadership in the profession and leadership across healthcare. The title of our program tonight is From the Clinic to Executive Leadership, and I'm honored to be joined by two individuals who currently serve as chief executive officers of their health system. We're delighted to have them join us. They represent facilities that are one of the nation's leading rehab hospitals in Houston, Texas, Memorial Hermann, and one of the leading critical access hospitals in the state of Iowa and Atlantic Iowa, Cass County Health. And so we are delighted to have Rhonda Abbott, the CEO of TIRR Memorial Hermann, and Brett Altman, CEO of Cass Health, join us this evening. I'm going to start and give just a brief overview of their bios, but really tonight is a conversation with both of these leaders to really talk about what skills that they had as physical therapists originally, and now as CEOs of leading health systems in our country, and how physical therapists can pursue this path in healthcare leadership. So as I said, I'm joined tonight by Rhonda Abbott. Rhonda is currently on the board of directors of the American Medical Rehabilitation Providers Association. She's also a member of the American Physical Therapy Association, so thank you for that. And also part of the American College of Healthcare Executives. In addition, Rhonda is a fellow, or a Tom Walt Leadership Development Fellow with the Texas Physical Therapy Association. She has a bachelor's degree from Texas A&M, her physical therapy degree from Texas Women's University, and an MBA from West Texas A&M University. So as I said, Brett is a licensed physical therapist as well, and certified athletic trainer. He has started his career as director of physical medicine and rehabilitation in Newton, Iowa, and moved up through the ranks there and was CEO and president. And then 3 years ago, just in 2017, moved over to become the CEO of Cass Health in Atlantic, Iowa. And as you'll hear tonight, both of their facilities, whether it's Memorial Hermann or Cass Health, have been awarded awards as some of the top facilities in rehab hospitals and in critical access hospitals. And really, not only are they fantastic leaders, but they're leading facilities that are at the front edge of changing healthcare in the United States. So we're delighted to have them join us. So please join me in welcoming Rhonda Abbott and Brett Altman to the APTA Live tonight. So gave you a little brief bio of who you are and what you're currently doing, but I'm really interested to ask you to first describe, and I'll start with Rhonda, to describe your current role and then also your first job as a physical therapist. So we can see both ends of your path, where you started in physical therapy and where you're at today. So go ahead, Rhonda.
Thank you, Justin, for that great introduction and for the opportunity to join you all today. This is really a privilege and an honor. And I currently serve as the CEO for TIRR Memorial Hermann and the Memorial Hermann Rehabilitation Network. So that consists of our flagship inpatient rehabilitation hospital here in the Houston, Texas Medical Center, which is an honor in itself to help to provide leadership for this amazing organization. And we also have another freestanding inpatient rehab that we help to oversee within our network, and 5 inpatient rehab units that are embedded within acute hospital campuses. So a really fantastic inpatient rehab platform. In addition to that, we have 7 comprehensive outpatient centers, and we serve kiddos, children, all the way up to adults. And we just had a recognition recently for being ranked number 2 in the country by U.S. News and World Report. And we're definitely very proud of that. That is the legacy of what TIRR is. Certainly isn't all about me. It is really about our teams, our physicians, and the patients that we're here to help serve. So it's an honor to be in this role. My first job, well, that's kind of easy because my first job was here. But I have to go back just a little bit further. I had a student internship as a physical therapy student on our pediatric inpatient rehab program that was here at the time in 2001. I fell in love with TIRR. I mean, quite honestly, that is how I describe it. The experience of the clinicians that I was able to be exposed to, the work and the outcomes that we were accomplishing for children on that unit just made me know, this is the place I want to be and want to grow up from a rehabilitation perspective. And so I was fortunate to be hired on to the spinal cord injury unit program and team, and the rest is history. But I helped to, participate in adolescent groups and aquatic therapy and all of that great frontline clinical stuff for our patients, and it was really just a blast. That was my first job almost 20 years ago.
Well, thank you. That's I think we all sort of look back on those first experiences as something that really shaped us, and probably had more influence than we expected when we first had those exposures and those experiences. So I want to turn it over to Brett to really talk about both his current duties and his current role, and then also his first job as a physical therapist.
All right. Thanks, Justin. So my current responsibilities are just the overall executive leadership of Cass Health in Atlantic, Iowa. We are a 25-bed critical access hospital. We recently received an award called the Top 20 Overall Critical Access Hospital in the country out of 1,353 facilities. And so we're very proud of that, based on quality, outcomes, customer service, patient satisfaction, inpatient and outpatient market share, and financial stability and value. And so those are all things that we really want to be known for. And we have a great team of about 400 people in a county of 13,000. And so 1 out of every 3 of our patients now comes from outside of Cass County. And we have grown significantly over the last 5 years. My first job, so as you might imagine, being in Iowa, all of Iowa is rural. And my first job was for a private practice in Northwest Iowa, where we serviced about a half a dozen different rural hospitals. And we all had company cars and drove to those rural hospitals. And it did shape me because I was the solo therapist at most of these facilities, and you had to be able to take good care of a pediatric patient, a neuro patient, or a stroke patient, certainly orthopedics and manual therapy. And so I felt like it really helped me become more well-rounded, as well as started to give me some management experience right out of the chute to lead these small therapy departments.
That's great. And you both really articulated how your facilities have shaped you and your experience have shaped you as physical therapists and leaders. I think when we were preparing for tonight's presentation and discussion, I started to realize how small of a community physical therapy was. I was the first time I heard the words Memorial Hermann was when I was the lobbyist for APTA, and Gabby Giffords was transported to Memorial Hermann to get her rehab following the gunshot that she endured. So just really talked about the great leadership and inpatient rehab that she received there, and became a question I started getting on the Hill is, what do you know about Memorial Hermann? Because it was such an interest to everyone in Congress, and had to learn a little bit about the organization. And my first observational experience in PT school was actually at the hospital that Brett now leads with a physical therapist named Steve Strong, and in Atlantic, Iowa. And so it's great to reconnect with both of you, and appreciate all you do on that. Next, I want to just sort of jump into questions, and I'll start with Brett this time and go in. When APTA started a few years ago, APTA started having a conversation and an interest from our members of how do physical therapists transition from the clinic to the boardroom, or from bedside to boardroom, from the clinic to the C-suite, whatever sort of transition we want to use with that. But there was a lot of questions starting to emerge: is how do they prepare for this role? How do they develop and become leaders, not only in rehab, but across the whole healthcare system? So my first question is, how did your background, education, and training as a physical therapist prepare you to become a healthcare leader? So Brett, I'll start with you.
All right. Well, I think physical therapists in general, first of all, in order to get into PT school, you kind of have to be hungry, humble, and smart. You have to be outgoing. You have to have had participated in extracurricular activities, and then as a therapist, we do a patient management plan. We do goal training. We essentially do strategic planning. And so I think there's some natural overlap with executive leadership in healthcare, and maybe a microcosm of that is patient management of healthcare. And I know that, as I mentioned before, I just got more and more interested in leadership. Started taking some continuing education in leadership. I think physical therapists are lifelong learners. And so I think, again, it kind of lends us to be eclectic in what we learn and what we do. And our skill set lends itself to leadership and executive leadership in healthcare.
That's great. Rhonda, a little bit, what's your perspective on sort of some of those background skills, training you had as a physical therapist that you led you to leadership, that you apply to your leadership?
Well, I definitely echo several things that Brett shared already, but I do think the team focus, the collaboration that happens within a healthcare setting as a physical therapist leads to better abilities to support the team that you're supporting from an employee perspective, physicians, et cetera. I also think the questioning, the research component and looking for the evidence, being part of creating evidence and then applying it, I think it has a great correlation in leadership. What is the leadership evidence that's out there? Brett said it, lifelong learning. I mean, I think for me, I recognized early on, a leader can lead from anywhere. Doesn't matter what their title is or what their role is. And so kind of taking that physical therapy ICF model, that International Classification of Functioning, and the impairments, activities, and participation there. What are the barriers, restrictions, and limitations that our patients experience? And we know that from a physical therapist point of view, how to help address those barriers and limitations and really maximize participation of a patient. You're applying that same kind of concept really when you're working with teams. How do you maximize your team's participation and engagement? I do really enjoy, continued learning. And one of my favorite books is a book by author Daniel Pink called Drive. It really talks about what people need to feel like they're optimally participating in their work environment. Talks about mastery, autonomy, and purpose. And I think that's definitely part of our role as healthcare leaders and something we learn in the physical therapy world to address for our patients. But we're also able to apply those same things from a healthcare leadership perspective. I love one of the quotes in there that talks about really creating, less of a management structure and more, creating this renaissance for self-determination. And again, I think that's something that we do as therapists for our patients. We empower them. We give them the skills and the tools that they need so that they can recover. And that's the same, and be included in their environments. And then that's the same thing we're trying to do for our teams, ideally.
Those are great. And I get asked by students all the time, since I'm a physical therapist in this role for APTA, is what skills did I need to become a CEO of an organization? And our organization, from a standpoint, you both manage a lot more employees and a lot more staff than I do. But I always say that from a standpoint of leadership, PTs come with 3 superpowers, and those are the clinical decision-making process that we use in patient management. So how to diagnose a problem and design a treatment plan and interventions to solve that. And that applies whether you're dealing with a patient or whether you're dealing with a challenge that you're facing in systems. I think the second superpower is observation. We have to learn how to see the environment in which a patient interacts and has to navigate or has to function. And so the power of observation, I think, is often underutilized as something we gain as physical therapists, and how we apply that to leadership. And then last, we're coaches. We partner with patients all the time to help them get outcomes. We don't we have to encourage them to change behaviors, encourage them to do things. And that's a lot of the team building that you spoke with. I'll probably ask it later, but since you mentioned Daniel Pink, I had a weird, there's a great podcast in physical therapist by Steve Anderson called Profiles in Leadership. And Steve asked to interview me a couple years ago, and I walked in to do the interview, and Daniel Pink was sitting there. And I was literally like, I think I'm in the wrong room. and then I had to admit that I hadn't read Drive in front of him, to him. and so anyway, but he was interviewing. So that podcast is probably searchable on Steve's podcast. But if you want to listen to Daniel Pink or pick up Drive, those are great suggestions. So we've talked about what physical therapists have for leadership. Let's talk a little bit about where you think physical therapists, what we lacked or what we needed to augment our education to be effective leaders. So both of you have pursued MBAs. You've obviously embraced lifelong learning. Can you talk about some of the things where you felt you needed to really sort of take that posture of learning to augment your clinical skills with leadership skills to become an effective CEO or effective, even before you were CEO, effective member of a leadership team? So I'll start with Rhonda I'll start with Brett this time. So sorry.
Okay. Well, I always appreciate and enjoy listening to everybody's story about how they got into healthcare administration, because probably the majority of healthcare executives don't start with that in mind. And I certainly didn't as well. So I was in Newton, Iowa, which was the headquarters of Maytag before Maytag moved to Mexico in 2006. And our hospital, the wheels had kind of fallen off the hospital. We had 3 hospital administrations in 2 years. And the board came to me as a longtime successful, at least they thought a successful rehab director, and said, would you be our interim CEO until we can hire a new one? And I had just led a men's Bible study about having your midlife crisis and leading at a higher level. And so I looked him right in the eye and said, yeah, I'll do that. And it was a very tumultuous time. We had our first layoff in history of 56 people. My job was to kind of pave the way for the new guy when he got there. So he arrived and he said, I need you to stay in hospital administration and help me. We can't really afford to go out and hire new administrators or an administrative team. And after I told him no 3 times, on the 4th time, I said, well, I'd have to go back and get an MBA or an MHA degree to do what you're asking me to do, which was essentially to be his COO. And he said, yep, do that. And so I took the leap and did that. And it's been a very gratifying, fulfilling step. And people ask me all the time, do you miss physical therapy? And my answer is I really don't, but I liked it when I did it. And I like what I'm doing now just as well also. So my biggest gap was getting the degree. And I've always felt like I kind of have the street smarts to do things, but you need the degree.
Yeah, I think those are great points. And taking the leap is a mentor of mine, Steve Levin, used to say, take the leap and the net will appear. And I'm not always that confident, but it's a great line. And sometimes you do just have to take that leap. So Rhonda, let me turn it over to you. Where did you see gaps that you needed to sort of fill? And how did you pursue that lifelong learning to really augment your skills?
Sure. I appreciate the leap concept as well. I think, we might have gaps related to education, our own experiences, our personality. I mean, as much as we all think maybe we're delightful people, there are things that I'm not good at just because that's a little bit of who I am. And so going back to what do we do as physical therapists that applies to healthcare leadership? Well, we reflect, right? I reflect a lot on what are strengths, but what are the opportunities and what are some of those gaps? So definitely identified, I have a need to, work on networking early in my director career to just learn from maybe some varied experiences, I did look to our professional organization, to APTA, served as a delegate in the House of Delegates. I also then, looked to the Tom Waugh Leadership Development Program that the Texas Physical Therapy Association had created and said, sure, I'll jump into that, 2-year commitment, but was able to complete that as well. And it added a lot of depth just to, experiences and who I, was able to meet and understand kind of a larger picture for what our professional organization is trying to accomplish. And then beyond that, like Brett, recognized, yes, I have some financial experience just from being on the job, but that isn't necessarily as strong as a curriculum in a master's in business administration. And so did choose to pursue that as well. Now, my husband says you can't go back to school ever again. So we'll see, but it was well worth it. I absolutely learned so much, more concretely related to finance, related to strategy. I have to say the negotiation class that I took was really next level. And I like to think that maybe my power of influence is a little bit stronger after that, but it really was an eye-opening experience. I learn from I try to learn, from everyone that I'm exposed to, the people that I help to support, my colleagues, and certainly mentors. So I think that identifying that, and again, being reflective about, well, what is it that this person does that helps accomplish this particular goal, and then see, I sort of try that on for size. I'm actually a little bit more of an introverted kind of personality naturally. So I have had a mentor, my most recent predecessor, and I have other friends, colleagues that are mentors in this arena. If I surround myself by people who are more extroverted, I think that helps to pull it out of me as well. And I'm very thankful, for that opportunity. But you have to start by recognizing maybe I need to grow in that way. I'm glad that I've been able to maybe, make some of those changes.
Those are great. As I was sort of reading up on both of you, one of the things I noticed, and this is probably a shameless plug too, but you both had a lot of experience at the state chapter level. And one of the strengths of APTA is actually its state chapters. So both of you had involvement with the Texas Physical Therapy Association and the Iowa Physical Therapy Association. And frankly, both of them have a long legacy of leadership in this profession. And whether it was Rhonda's experience with the Tom Waugh leadership development that the TPTA had, or the Texas Physical Therapy Association has, and then Brett had got a recognition, the Ollie Farr award through the Iowa chapter as well, which really just signifies sometimes it's that grassroots, getting your hands dirty leadership too, even in the association. So really appreciate both your service and doing that. I think as I was transitioning in this space, it was very clear my lack of financial background was something that I had to close. And so I'd always, been on the policy side at APTA and had done a lot of outreach on public policy, advocacy, and lobbying, but really not a lot of business sense from a standpoint of financial planning, budgeting, business development. And fortunately, a physical therapist that runs a large PT practice called PT Solutions, Dale Yake, gave me the opportunity to really serve on his board and understand the finances of a large company. And that was invaluable as I transitioned into leadership, to be able how to read a financial statement, how to just go through some of those, which I've now find myself becoming more introverted and more into data than I ever thought I would have any interest in doing from that standpoint, because I'm loving dashboards and loving data and using that to sort of grow as a leader. So thank you for your insights. Question 3, and this time I'll start with Rhonda, is where and how have you seen your clinical background shape your decision-making, and where your background has resulted in a unique perspective, an innovation, or a better outcome due to being a clinician first?
It's really interesting that, I think as you are a PT, you can't really separate that out from your thought processes. It's ingrained in who I am when I'm making decisions. So it's been particularly interesting, I think, moving into this CEO role and seeing how that plays out. I think also because I've been in the same organization for 20 years, nearly 20 years, then I know how some things work. Obviously, times change, and I don't know the exact experiences that happen today and now as well as I did 20 years ago, but it adds a lot of depth to my ability to kind of consider and contemplate how we might address some of our challenges and our opportunities. So I think that's pretty exciting. I think sometimes the team probably doesn't appreciate it all that much, but I know, what we've done for the past 20 years, more or less, because I can jump into a lot of ideas that maybe they'd prefer I overlook. But one of the innovations, or it's sort of a re-innovation, if you will, that I felt really strongly about, given my clinical experiences here, was bringing back our inpatient pediatric program. And we had that program, then it closed for various reasons. And we had a recent opportunity, mid-pandemic, nothing like in the middle of a pandemic, to open a new program and launch this again. But we have a community need. I think we do that really well at TIRR, is identify, what is the area, what does the country really need from us that we can do that's special, because we serve the most complex patients really in the country. And there was a calling related to that pediatric inpatient rehab need. And I was beyond excited to say, yes, please, let's do that, because of those patient experiences that I had during my student clinical affiliation, and how much of a difference I saw us be able to make, the clinicians at that time, be able to make for children and for their parents and for their entire families. So it was really meaningful for me. I helped at the time, I was the VP of operations, and then moved into the interim CEO role, while we were inventing the program again and getting ready to launch it. And so I really did have the nuts and bolts logistics job of helping the team, put everything together, and the team did a phenomenal job. And I couldn't be more thrilled with the outcome. We opened in December of 2020, and I'm just thrilled to see where that goes next. But I think, had I not had that specific experience, had I not been a therapist providing that frontline care, I don't know if I would have seen it as strongly as I did. And then I think there are multiple other things that my experiences, lend insight into, but that's just one that we've more recently encountered.
Great. That's fabulous. Brett, where have you seen your clinical background shape some decision-making, or that background result in sort of a unique perspective or innovation?
Thinking about being eclectic in rehab. I had the honor of running a seminar company alongside my day job that helped me to speak in public, educate people. As you mentioned earlier, both Rhonda and Justin, being active in APTA, I know I served as president, vice president, treasurer, House of Delegates for APTA. All of those leadership responsibilities add up, as well as I was an athletic trainer that had the honor of going to the 2004 Olympic Games with the U.S. triathlon team. And so, between clinical management experiences, always doing what's best for the organization and the patient. And I think physical therapists are always patient-centric. And if we can, work with physicians and recruit physicians, recruitment's a big part of what I do now. And I did the same thing with therapists in my former rehab department, where we recruited dozens of therapists. We're now recruiting dozens of physicians. So I think it helps us to be able to relate to physicians. We know what it's like to lay hands on a patient. We know what it's like to have to document on an electronic health record. And to be able to share some of these stories and experiences kind of gives you a foot in the door to building relationship with other professionals.
Yeah, I think those are great. I think something about our background as physical therapists just lend us to innovation. We see our patients, and if there was a right way to treat every patient, our jobs would have been easy, but it wasn't. You had to sort of assess the environment, listen to the patient, and then innovate. And so innovation becomes a natural part of us. And I think one of the things I've found as a physical therapist is that ability to be adaptable and sort of say, oh, maybe there's not a right way or a wrong way to do this. I call it embracing the gray. And so how do you sort of figure out that it's not always the same treatment or program? It's always, you got to sort of adjust to the situation and the environment. So I think that's fabulous. So one of the things in my day job is I get to be the chief cheerleader and promoter of physical therapy, and as part of the APTA. And it's it's an easy job to promote this profession with all the members we have and the good work we do. But one of the things that I get a question about quite often is they see, especially young physical therapists, will see physical therapists who have become leaders outside of the profession, whether that's in research, whether that's in a different field, and they drop the PT credential. So I'd love to know your perspective on, do you utilize the PT credential still? And if you do, what kind of questions does that generate? And what kind of perspective does you think it adds to the question when people learn you're not just the CEO, but you actually have this background as a physical therapist? So Brett, I'll give you first shot at that.
All right. So I do still use my credential. I'm still licensed in Iowa. I'm still a board certified orthopedic specialist through APTA. And then I did go on to become a fellow of the American College of Healthcare Executives. And so I think it's important to represent your background. And I think I think having the ability to talk to people about being a clinician, being a licensed healthcare professional, just helps us to basically say, hey, we understand what it's like to be a nurse or a doctor or a nurse practitioner or a PA or a rad tech or whatever that is. And it just makes us be able to relate to what's going on. Certainly at our place, it's rural. And so, we are probably pretty relational to begin with. But when people know that you have the background, that you've kind of lived their life before, that you can empathize, that you're patient-centric, it really builds trust. And I think relationships are all about trust. And so I think maintaining the credential is important as we move forward in however our career unfolds.
Great. Rhonda, any additional perspective that you want to add to that?
I think it's such an interesting question. And I agree wholeheartedly with everything that Brett just shared as well. I mean, it's part of who I am. It's part of how, I came into this role. So I feel really strongly that I would want to continue to keep that credential. Plus, on that pathway of lifelong learning, and particularly in leading the rehab industry, we need to stay on top of what is the latest. And so I feel committed to the continuing competency and making sure that, I know what is happening in the field of physical therapy and other rehabilitation professions as I can. So I think that's important also. Our chief nursing officer is obviously an RN, but was a PCA, a personal care attendant with patients in her history. She's proud of that. Our vice president of operations is an occupational therapist, and she's proud of that. I mean, I think that those are important experiences that we have had that add depth, and to your point, Brett, credibility to our ability to serve in these roles. What kind of questions come up? I mean, I've heard folks that are therapists on the team, not directly speaking to me, but I've heard them in the hallway, even talking to their patients, like, she's a PT. I think there's something really cool about that, that our team, should see that this is an opportunity for anybody that is at a clinical level to be able to accomplish. And patients, I'll say, probably where I get most of the questions from are our patients who really find it fascinating that, I have a clinical background, probably more fascinating that I've been here the entire time developing my career growing up from a professional perspective. And so just today I was rounding and visiting with a patient, and the patient said to me, "Oh my goodness, that's just really impressive and phenomenal." And I don't know how impressive it is, but it is very, I think it really connects for everyone that's in our building, that there's a clinical element to what we do, what I've done. And I think that that resonates with people a little bit uniquely.
Yeah, great. I love it. I asked that question. It always came back to me because I get the job of sometimes going through databases and trying to figure out how many physical therapists were awarded research, or how many physical therapists are currently CEOs of hospitals. And if they don't use the credential, it's hard to, I'm like, I think they're a PT, but I don't know. And the good news is we did a project probably 15 years ago with NIH, and there was a huge gap of PTs using their PT degree. So we were searching database, and they'd come up as PhDs, but not PT PhDs. So it was really hard to get the scope of how many PTs were being funded. And when we were working with the American College of Healthcare Executives on this project, it was great in working with their staff team at ACHE, because they instantly could look at the credentials and say, oh, there is a group of PTs who have not only, it's not a few, it's, several that have become CEOs. And when we were talking before, there's, Brett knows several in Iowa, and there's several in the inpatient rehab facility. And it creates that community. It creates those contacts in addition to that credibility as clinicians. So next, I have questions just specific for each of you. One of the things that I thought was great about this panel was just the diversity of practice settings in which you practice. And before we went live, we were talking about just that challenges. You guys have different workforce challenges. You have different other measures, because you are a very, elite rehab hospital, and number 2 in the nation, and a very elite critical access hospital. Very different patient populations, very different issues, challenging. So I have some questions specific to that. So I'll start with Brett. Rural America is disproportionately feeling gaps in healthcare, and health disparities and equity are a key focus of this administration. And we've seen that across that. What has made your facility a success in this, this pandemic, these gaps we're seeing in rural healthcare, and how have you taken the Cast Health model and really made that a national leader, and how have you done that through your leadership?
Yeah, well, I believe in keeping things simple, and so the KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid, and we kind of have a framework that everybody who works here knows, and it is our mission that has 2 key words, and that is superior experience. We're here to give the patient, their family, the community a superior experience. Everyone we're privileged to serve, including one another. So it all starts with our mission. Our vision is to be the best rural hospital in America, and we know that we're a long ways toward that, actually being a top 10 critical access hospital in the country. When you call the Chartist group and ask them, what place were we really? They don't tell you. They'll tell you a range of 10, and they said you could be first or you could be 10th. And I'm like, that's perfect, because if we were first, we would need a new vision statement. So everybody knows our vision, our mission, and then we have 5 overarching goals here that don't change year over year. So everybody here, from housekeeping and food service to our medical staff, knows that we have 5 pillars: quality, service, people, finance, and growth. A lot of hospitals use the same pillars. Our performance goal under quality is to be in the top quartile in the country for quality and outcomes. And there's actually an award put out for that called the Performance Leadership Award. And we've received that award for the past 5 years since the inception of that program coming out. And then we've been a top 100 critical access hospital in the country. That's our service goal. And again, this year we were actually top 10, but we're not going to raise the bar quite that high yet. And then our people goal is to be a top workplace in the state of Iowa. And so we found out 2 weeks ago that for the 7th consecutive year, Cass Health was one of Iowa's top mid-size employers in the state, ranking 16th, which was the highest our ranking has ever been. Our finance goal is to be break even or better. And to be honest, we don't focus on our finance pillar. If we focus on the other 4, finance takes care of itself. But the last goal is perhaps more important, to your point, Justin, for rural healthcare, and that is providing more access to care. And that's our growth goal. And so I had mentioned that I do a lot of recruiting. We have recruited over 40 new providers in 4.5 years to Cass Health. And that's amazing for any size hospital, let alone a rural facility, almost averaging 1 new provider per month. And so we have over 80 providers now who work here. And you can imagine what that's done for our growth. The community so much appreciates the access to healthcare. Like most rural communities, we're aging, we're declining in population. And I can't tell you how many seniors have approached me in the main hallway or the lobby of the hospital and said, "Thank you for recruiting a rheumatologist. I couldn't drive downtown Omaha or Des Moines, Iowa any longer, and I hated to ask my kids to take a day off to take me. And now I can see some of the best quality physicians in the state right here in our community." So that's kind of the approach that we've taken is we have our mission, vision, and our goals all laid out, and everybody knows them, including the community. So when we speak at Rotary or Kiwanis or Lions Club, we go through this whole framework of what we're all about. And I can tell you that the community is really behind us, and we just have a ton of momentum going right now.
That's fabulous. And I think access to care is such a big issue in this country right now. And we see that in rural areas, we see it in urban centers. And how do we make sure people have the level of care and the type of care they need? And it's a challenge for, the rural hospital in Iowa and the elite, inpatient rehab hospital in Houston. So Rhonda, my question for you is, today about 2/3 of all physical therapists are women. And as we celebrated our centennial, it was obviously noted that APTA was started by 21 women. And we had a t-shirt that was selling like hotcakes during our centennial that just basically said APTA, founded by women. And that was going off the charts and from that standpoint. In addition, we have begun to see progress in boardrooms for women's executives. And so what advice do you have for women leaders? And how can we as an organization at APTA and a profession really support and build the next generation of women leaders in healthcare and beyond?
Great question, Justin. Before I address that, I do want to say congratulations to Brett, because I think what you're doing is really phenomenal for access to care. Like Brett, we have pillars. He just talked about there are 5 pillars. We don't have 5, we have 4. Maybe that's because finance is not one of them also. But our pillars are clinical excellence, education. We have a whole education academy that's internal and external facing. Research, which some people don't know that we do, but we have a fantastic research group. And then lastly, it's advocacy. And within advocacy, that includes inclusion for individuals with disabilities, but really, at large for everyone, in their communities, and to be, whatever they choose to be. So when we think about women leaders, my wish or goal would be that we don't have to use that term at some point, and we don't have to maybe also think about the other areas of equity and diversity at some point, because we will have reached a place where we don't need to separate anything out differently. But what are we doing about helping women who have an interest in leadership and really getting to that level? I personally see it as kind of a one person at a time, one culture or organization at a time. We are very fortunate at TIRR to be part of the Memorial Hermann Health System. Memorial Hermann has dedicated resources and truly invested in our equity, diversity, and inclusion efforts. But as part of that, in years ago, really invested in what's called Women Leaders of Memorial Hermann. I was able to serve as a champion with that group, and currently I am a mentor, and we have assigned mentoring groups. We have workshops, great content that is created for us to kind of help one another out in our leadership journeys. And so that's been just fantastic to be a part of. And I think, I'm really fortunate that our organization kind of declared that as something that was going to be of value to our workforce and our female workforce. I also think, what advice do I have to give folks? First and foremost, I would say, if you think that you are maybe 50 to 75% ready for a job, just go for it. It's fact, there's data that supports that women are more hesitant to go for positions because until they're like 110% ready and they feel like they could, do it in their sleep. Well, that's a little too late. So jump in here, don't be hesitant. Take help from others. So I was very fortunate that, again, my immediate predecessor helped to kind of champion me. And I feel like he and I were then able to make that change and be able to see myself in this role. That's really fantastic. Let others help you. And then what to do, since it's one person at a time, what do you do next? You help the next person. And so how do you serve as an ally in women leadership and for the other, equity and diversity areas where we can really help lift other people up? I think that's an opportunity. I don't know if you've met Adam Grant, but another great book writer, Justin. He wrote the book Give and Take. And so my word of advice is, be a giver and see how you can give back to the profession and also to women and others.
Yeah, I have not met him, but I did stand about 2 people behind him in the security line at the Chicago O'Hare Airport, and I follow him, so I knew exactly who he was. So it was very funny. I was sort of a celebrity stalking at that point. I didn't have the guts to sort of say anything, but I was watching him from that standpoint. But I thought one of your great points, and it's a concept, and Brett and you both talked about this early about lifelong learning. But I was thinking as I reflected on leadership and the past year, I've been reflecting a lot, and there's concepts about role models, about mentoring and coaching, and a new concept that sort of came into my spectrum was the concept of sponsorship. And I hadn't thought of that and when I look back on my leadership journey, there were people who actually sponsored me, who took an active interest and developed, and I didn't know they were doing it at the time because it wasn't a coach, it wasn't a mentor, it wasn't a role model even. But they took an active interest that led me to places that I probably wouldn't have got without their nudge, push, whatever it was. Is there, people in your background that were those, as you look back, those nudges and those sponsors, and I've sort of tried to embrace that now that sometimes it isn't a formal relationship. It's just sponsoring somebody to help them have that little bit of confidence to do something that they might question, but they can do it. And so is there somebody in your past that sort of did that for you? Rhonda, do you want to start?
Yes, it's because it's very easy for me to answer this one. I'll start. My clinical instructor on that physical therapy program, Teresa Kramer, physical therapist, still does pediatric team leadership. Awesome. I wouldn't have had my first job without Teresa. Heather Fons Este, also a physical therapist, my first mentor, really, as I came onto the spinal cord injury team, didn't have spinal cord injury experience really from my pediatric days. She just invested in me and allowed me to grow. And that was really, really phenomenal. And then I think most recently, Jerry Ashworth, who still is in our Memorial Hermann Health System and is a CEO for 2 of our campuses in the acute space now. And, really, I literally called him my sponsor in a joking, casual conversation, but definitely has done that for me. So I think if we can take that same component and apply it to someone or multiple someones, I'd say, many people, then that's just going to further everyone in the long run.
Fabulous. Brett, anyone on your path that really you felt And when you look back, you probably didn't realize it, but they really did shape you and give you that nudge?
Yes. So, there's really dozens of people, but the two people that come to my mind are a pair of Steves. So Steve Clark was a physical therapist in Storm Lake, Iowa, that when I was first interested in physical therapy and wanted some observation experience as a college junior, Steve was just a role model, just a machine, very patient-centric, very kind and compassionate. And so Steve was a great role model and mentor for me early on in my PT career. And then a gentleman by the name of Steve Long, who was he was the CEO who came on after I was being interim and asked me to stay and help him. So, mentors really teach you your style, your leadership style. And I learned in 4.5 years from Steve Long how to be a hospital CEO, so that when he left, I was able to pick up and not have a terrible amount of gaps, because he really did sponsor and pour into me. And now I'm finding that I'm starting to sponsor other people, as I can see the light at the end of a career, and we're training up other great people on our team who make me look good, to be able to do my job someday when I'm not here. And so I think life kind of goes full circle that way. And so I appreciate Rhonda's comments on this topic as well. We're very thankful for the probably hundreds of people that have touched our lives and career, if not thousands.
Great. Well, we're sort of getting toward the end, and we got about 9 minutes left. So I want to give you guys sort of a parting shot. If there's something you think you could say to the next generation of physical therapists that are interested in healthcare leadership, what would you like to sort of leave them with tonight as sort of your parting shot for their journey, for what's ahead, and just anything you want to add? Brett, do you want to start?
Yeah, Rhonda said it earlier. I think she said something, if you're 50 to 75% inclined to do something, just do it. And I think we all need to take risks. If you want to, if you're a person who wants to continue to develop and grow, and whether it's climb the ladder, so to speak, or do other things, you just need to be willing and flexible. I had mentioned that I started my own seminar company as a side business, and put a manual together and jumped in a minivan with the old slide projectors and screens and drove across the Midwest doing manual therapy seminars for several years. And, to go to the Olympics and be a medic for the U.S. triathlon team, all of those experiences, being active in IPTA and APTA, all of those experiences come together to allow you future opportunities. And so I think if we didn't take advantage of those opportunities, and also always doing things that are best for your organization. That's always kind of been my litmus test. If you think it's best for this organization for me to go from being a longtime rehab director to a COO, then I'll do that. If you think it's in the best interest of the organization when the former CEO left to appoint me into that role, then I'll do that, even though I was the guy who least wanted to see the CEO leave and inherit his job. And so that has always served me well, is being patient-centric, being organizational-centric, and taking risks.
Great. Rhonda, your final shot of the night, what would you like to leave our listeners and viewers with?
Yeah, I mean, I think I said it a little bit earlier, and then Brett brought it back around. It's an amazing opportunity. It is humbling. It's incredibly rewarding. It is creating change for, you have a caseload of patients that you created change for and help to empower and and heal and recover. And you're just translating that to a much larger spectrum, ideally, that's your goal. And being able to implement that, in a broader way, it's incredibly rewarding. So I'm going back to what really is motivating and helps people want to participate in their career journeys, and that's mastery. So becoming good at something and investing in your own growth and development, definitely have that opportunity. Autonomy. I think that, autonomy in healthcare can be difficult sometimes with schedules and patient care, responsibilities. You can't have ultimate autonomy 100% of the time, but in leadership, you definitely have some different types of autonomy. And then from a purpose point of view, you absolutely have a very clear purpose, which is probably in your organization's mission, your own personal mission for yourself and what you want to accomplish. And so it meets all of those needs. It's a wonderful journey. And if you're interested in it, I think talk to somebody, figure out what the mentorship plan is going to be. What are the experience and exposure needs that you have? Create that plan, execute it, find a sponsor or an ally, and get there. Do it.
Yep. Well, thank you. I think this has been incredibly informative for me, and I really have enjoyed both your perspectives. And to our viewers tonight, as you can see, we've heard from two great leaders that are physical therapists and really changing healthcare, not only in their facilities, but in their communities and across their peer organizations. Just a little bit of background is this is the first of a 3-part series that we're having on physical therapists and healthcare leadership. A few years ago, APTA was hearing from members of wanting to learn more about physical therapists going into healthcare leadership. And we were fortunate to, from members and from our own interactions, work with the American College of Healthcare Executives. And so they have joined us over the last year as we really sort of discovered ways we can collaborate and work together as a team in healthcare, both in their expertise in healthcare leadership and our expertise in physical therapists, and how we can support our joint members who are physical therapists that are pursuing paths in healthcare leadership. So next month, we are on the last Tuesday of the month, we'll have the second part of this series on APTA leadership, when my colleague Anita Haverson from the American College of Healthcare Executives will be with two other physical therapists, Burke Wilson from Texas Children's and Nicole Wilson from Community Health Network in Indianapolis. And they're going to talk specifically about fellowship in the American College of Healthcare Executives and what it takes and how that prepares you to take on roles at administrative and leadership levels in their organization. Just so CHE has a blog, and next month during PT month, they're actually featuring Nicole Wilson on some of her experiences as a physical therapist and a healthcare executive as part of PT month and their commitment to help supporting us at APTA. So please feel free to join us for that next APTA Facebook Live on October 26th. It'll again be on from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern time. And we're looking forward to continue the exploration of leadership in physical therapy and how we can help physical therapists really serve their facilities and their communities at a high level. So in closing tonight, please join me in thanking Rhonda Abbott and Brett Altman, who gave us generously of their time this evening, and just for sharing their expertise and their experience as physical therapists that are now leading their healthcare organization as CEOs. So thanks, Brett. Thanks, Rhonda, and appreciate all of you for joining us tonight on this APTA Facebook Live event.